I love Undertale. Don't you? I know some people do because after its release, whole communities were created around the smaller parts of the community named Alternate Universes, or AUs. Thousands of these things were created, many I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Some of your favorites might be Undertale Last Breath, Dusttale, Disbelief. Well, you'd be wrong, debatably. For the longest time, I'd have considered these AUs too, but recently I've heard about these things called Alternate Timelines. AUs drastically change the story of Undertale at a base level. For example, Underswap, Underfell, Outertale, etc. Stories like Dusttale, Disbelief, and Last Breath follow the events of Undertale to a point until they branch off into an alternate timeline. It's a very headcanon term, so you can just call these AUs anyway. The wikis sure do. But regardless, today we'll be going over some of the most popular alternate timelines. So without any further ado, let's get it. To start things off, I wanted to talk about an alternate timeline that's had many different interpretations over the years. Dusttale. Now, the original version, the Ask Dusttale blog, has already had a deep dive made, so today we'll be talking about the maybe more popular one, depending on what side of the fandom you're on, Evan Strablow's Dusttale fan game. Despite its flaws, this is my preferred version of the alternate timeline. It's the one I grew up with and is the one included in most trios and fan games. In this version, after an unreasonable amount of genocides, Kara had taken control of the human, either from the multiple genocide routes driving her insane or mischaracterization, and forced them to continue the genocidal loop. Meanwhile, Sans finally snapped, something causing him to remember the genocides and come up with a plan, gain XP, and kill the human. Some things that this Dusttale's Dust Sans shares with Ask Dusttale's Murder Sans is that since Sans has gone on his own murderous genocide run, he has lost the ability to use karma, his yellow and orange flashing eyes are replaced with red for determination, and he uses a strategy brought up in the original where Sans, instead of starting his murder spree in Snowdin straight away, he goes to ruins to kill as many monsters there to ensure the human has less XP and work his way upwards. Which is what Sans does in this version, since as soon as the game begins, we find Flowey, well... Okay, Jesus, Toriel, was that really necessary? Despite hearing there's a murderer on the loose, Toriel immediately leaves the human to go close off the ruins from the outside world. She must have ignored all the dust around to not realize that both murderers are already here. Anyway, yeah, thanks to Dust Sans seemingly going through Frisk's normal routes, there's much less monsters for Frisk to kill. Even Toriel is slain by Sans. For some reason, he drops the weapon he used to kill her afterwards. I guess he just didn't need that extra attack anymore. The cycle repeats in Snowdin. Dust Sans goes on ahead, killing as many monsters as possible, leaving only the leftovers for the human, until somewhere along the line, he spends too much time in a certain area and the human catches up with him. Cornering him in Snowdin's cave, Sans is forced to battle with the human until he takes a single hit and runs away. What a coward. The loop continues until we get to Papyrus, where after Sans kills him, he completely loses it, even starting to see a fake version of his brother, Phantom Papyrus. The cycle continues in Waterfall 2 until we get to Undyne, holding on to life with determination while Sans tries to kill her, giving the human a perfect opportunity to steal Undyne's XP, and also giving us a pretty banger FNF song. Sans crashes out on his imaginary brother, and they continue the cycle in Hotland, Sans and Kara running down to the True Lab, while Alphys tries to use the determination machine on Sans, but unlike someone we'll discuss in another video, my goat, she is not able to use the determination machine and is swiftly killed. Finally, fuck Mettaton, we get to the Judgment Hall. The two finally meet. Dust Sans is finally confident in his abilities, having killed Asgore and stolen his powers after being refused the 6 human souls. Being at a higher LV than the human and having a small amount of determination. I don't ever remember this guy having determination, but I suppose 329 resets will do that to you. Of course, he never really had a chance of winning, so despite his long journey, he is swiftly defeated by the human. But believing he'll remember this reset too, he begins taunting the human, telling him he'll kill Undyne and grow stronger in the next reset, leading to... before he dusts away, realizing that it's all futile. And yeah, that's the end of Evan's Dusttale. There's somehow a pacifist ending and a webcomic that follows that, but if you want to explore that, then play the game and read the comic for yourself. Both can be found on the Game Jolt page in the description, but most trios and interpretations usually take the bad ending sans anyway, despite its faults. This alternate timeline has become one of the most influential in the fandom, bringing Dusttale to the West, inspiring so many different takes like SP Dusttale, Dust Trust, the FNF mod I touched on earlier, and much, much more. we've started off with a banger. Let's see if the next one can live up to the hype. Next on our list is the most popular AU according to this guy, Last Breath. Following the events of countless genocide routes, as will be a very common trend going forward, on one of these runs, they come across Gaster's door. Things go on as usual, you talk to him, Gaster goes blah and leaves, but in Last Breath, instead of disappearing into the ether, he goes to Snowden and talks to the funny skeleton. He explains the resets, explains what the human will do, and offers him help, giving him powers to defeat the human, including orange bones, wingdings, screen flipping, and a secret tool that'll help us later. Now, once the human comes to the judgment hall, they've got their work cut out for them. Sans throwing everything and the kitchen sink at them, but unfortunately, it's not enough. And the human once again attacks Sans, but this time, he's got help. Gaster shields just enough of the attack to have Sans survive, which is like 99.99% of it, since Sans' health is in the decimals. And so, Sans once again fights back in phase 2. Even this and his iconic phase 2 melee bone is not enough to kill the human, so once again, the human attacks and it doesn't work. The man of the hour has finally arrived. Gaster protects him for real this time and helps Sans by possessing his body. Phase 3 time, y'all know what this is about. Enigmatic encounter, destroying the buttons, and an insane fight. Truly a fan game that the Undertale community will hardly forget. This AU started from the game, so many other interpretations have come since, like this amazing animation by Nococlip, the renewed version, which nobody talks about, but I like some of the music. Twisted Reality, which is a phase 3 remix that honestly stuck with me, and whatever this is. Rewatching playthroughs of the game has really reminded me how much of a chokehold it had on the community when it released. It also reminded me that there was supposed to be a chapter 2. After the Sans fight, the human gets their ass beat by these two somehow, and it ends with Alphys assumably coming up with a way to revive the fallen monsters, but I don't know. It's been 5 years and nothing's come out, and wait, how long did I say? Also, apparently the creator was up to some shit, but I don't know enough about it to speak on it, so let's go on to the next one. Next up is finally a timeline where 50 billion genocide routes were not committed. We have Horrortale. That's right, chopped head, immortal skeleton, axe guy. Not that axe guy. This AU takes place in an unknown amount of years after the neutral route. My guess is about a decade, but who knows. In this neutral route, all the main characters survive. Torio tries to become queen, but the monsters, led by Undyne, rebel and force her back into the ruins. Meanwhile, Undyne reinstates the war on humans, but to a much larger and more extreme extent. However, a lot of time would go by with no humans falling. So much time, in fact, that the core, the source of all magic, food, and monsterified air in the underground, stops working. Since the scientist who built it is lost to the void, Undyne goes to Alphys for a solution, but she doesn't want to share. With no one left to turn to, Undyne asks for the help from the monsters of the underground, and eventually, Sans takes the call. While the relation of Sans, Gaster, and the core is unknown, even in the original, in this version, Sans is at least somewhat related as he has the blueprints to the core. Undyne is ecstatic, but Alphys, she knows it's not gonna work, and she knows the real solution to this problem is standing right in front of her. Time goes by, chaos, and the monsters begin to starve. The core is unable to be fixed despite their best efforts, and many die during this period. Eventually, the stress gets to her and she goes all glitchtail Undyne on us, giving up and resigning herself to, well, a sight that Alphys is all too familiar with. Alphys tries to talk her out of it, but nothing is working until she finally brings herself to reveal the solution to their core problem, Sans the skeleton. Now, at the start of this section, you'd have heard me say immortal skeleton, and before I continue, Undertale AUs are made from the author's interpretation of Undertale. So in this AU, Sans is interpreted to be immortal, with his only weakness being his source of power, his Justice Eye. Honestly valid. I was wondering why it was lighting up too. Anyway, Undyne refuses to use Sans as their power source, but the small chance of things turning around is enough to convince her to live on until the next day, and is enough to put the fear of God into Sans. Queen of the Underground and smartest monster alive didn't think to search for echo flowers? Unbelievable. The next couple of weeks pass and Sans has locked himself away, trying to come up with a solution that doesn't involve him. Meanwhile, Papyrus is headed off to the castle. After one attempt of many to get Sans out of his room, he begins heading off when Sans stops him. Afraid of what they might do to Papyrus at the castle, Sans offers to take his place. Luckily for him, Undyne still doesn't want to go through with Alphys' plan, despite him pushing his luck like, try me? You know she's on your side. What's with the attitude? However, Sans seems to have come up with a different plan for the core, telling Undyne, let's destroy the core. Well, not completely. He wants to take out the core of the core and refuel it, but all Undyne is hearing is destroy the core. And all she's seeing is that problem-solving eye. Her hallucinations and prolonged insanity finally get the better of her, and she tries to extract his eye, but Sans, being Sans, fights back. She uses her green soul ability to halt Sans in place, which, for a guy whose best skill is dodging, really should spell the end for him, but he's able to deflect her attacks. Damn, Horror Sans really is kind of OP. Alphys tells Undyne on comms that Sans likely only has a finite number of bones, which is a bad idea, which we'll come back to haunt her later. Anyway, turns out Sans isn't the only one whose eye gives them powers, as after taking out Undyne's already fucked up eye, he attempts to leave, but for some reason, he can't teleport. Bro was so OP, the author had to nerf him themselves. With this, Undyne has the perfect opportunity to take out his eye and a little bit of his head too. So after extracting it, she goes off to power the core, and to everyone's delight, the power is back. It seems like his immortality is linked not only to the eye, but from him stealing the fallen human's organs and putting them in his body. It's also this AU's reasoning for Sans having blood, so hey, I respect the creativity, I guess. But like, what the fuck? Anyway, Papyrus calls his brother to tell him the good news. To Undyne's horror. She says she might not be able to hold him down, to which WOP Papyrus AU. Undyne leaves to figure out what to do now that everything is back to normal, but immediately after she leaves, Sans wakes up. Continuing his body snatcher ways, he steals one of the guard's eyes to replace his own. I'm not sure monster parts work the same as human parts, like shouldn't that be dusting soon? I don't know. Anyway, we finally get Sans's immortality explained, the eye keeping him alive, but from his cracked skull it looks like he can be physically damaged though, so maybe he's not actually immortal? I don't know. Regardless, he disappears to Undyne's horror, so she calls Alphys to ask her where he is, and luckily for her, Alphys knows exactly where he is. Undyne's search is quickly interrupted when her attention turns to the core, and it's completely destroyed. Okay, so was that really necessary, Sans? Their plan worked. You're still alive. The underground has power now. Why couldn't you just let them be? This is too petty even for you, bruh. The core is now destroyed and the eye supposedly protected. Sans, I don't think that's going to protect your eye. Why didn't you just steal it back? Undyne finds Alphys finally, but on some I have no mouth, I must scream type shit, Sans has stabbed Alphys in the brain, putting her into a vegetative state and taking away her greatest trait. After this, Sans just fucked off back to Snowdin, and apparently bygones be bygones. Undyne and Sans aren't complete enemies on sight, instead begrudgingly just coexisting. Regardless, that's how we get from Undertale to the events of Horrortale, which are from the new fallen child, Alizza's perspective, as she tries to survive in a harsh new underground with the help of Flowey. That's 2 AUs now where Flowey has turned over a new leaf. If I had a nickel, I'd have a nickel. I'm not going over the events of the story in full. There's already an amazing video out there on YouTube that low-key was one of the pushes that got me into making these kinds of videos. So watch that if you want to find out the rest of Horrortale's story, or play one of the many games that are probably on Game Jolt. Anyway, on to the next AU. We have Killer Tale. Wait, that's not its name. Undertale Something New. And oh god, this is more confusing than I thought. Okay, so this timeline has multiple world timelines. I believe that the timeline only splits at a certain point, and honestly, half of me calls bullshit that there's even a split timeline, but we'll get to that. So the story starts off with infinite genocides. And again, Kara is in control of the human's body. Apparently Sans remembers the resets, but at the end, it's also a big reveal that this is like attempt 420 of Kara trying to convince Sans to commit genocides with them. So I don't know, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Anyway, how does Kara finally convince Sans to join them? Well, the player controlling Kara messes with Sans's code, turning him into Killer Sans. Finally, with Sans on Kara's side, he goes around killing monsters, first Flowey, then Grillbee, and eventually Papyrus. Yeah, bro didn't take that very well. The slaughter continues, they reset, kill everyone, reset again, all because Sans wanted to feel something new. Wait, I thought they started because he changed his code. Whatever the reason, Sans has now started to ooze whatever this is, from his eyes as a result from the resets, his murdering, and assumably his new determination. All of the bad sense of the determination I'm learning. It also morphs his soul into a bullseye. Huh. I thought this would have had a more direct explanation for that, but no, it's just determination. That's a bit anticlimactic, but sure, okay. An undefined amount of resets later, Killer begins to doubt Kara, tired of her being the one in control. He sneak attacks and kills them, becoming the most determined character in his universe. It's really that easy? Bro, what? You know how many times Dusttale has tried this exact same thing? Anyway, that's his backstory. After knowing about this guy for so long from the Nightmare stuff and Undertale Trios stuff, I expected a more in-depth backstory, but it's surprisingly simple, which in some areas is a good thing, but in other ways makes things very, very confusing. Like the "my memories" thing. Does he remember? Does he not? It's a little contradictory. Also, his iconic look is explained away as determination, and especially his motivations. Like, did he join Kara because he got his code changed? Or because he remembered the 50 billion resets? Like, I don't know. Each comic ends with the author reminding us that English is not their first language, which may have contributed to the confusion, but that literally cannot be helped, and it's not the author's fault. And I just want to clarify that it's amazing that they were able to spread this AU out to the West with English not being their first language. However, the most confusing part about this alternate timeline to me, well, are the alternate timelines. But we'll get to that later, because there's one more story that I literally found by accident. Yeah, thanks for the help, Wiki. This comic is set way in the distant future, mainly because there was a shit ton of comics that I missed, I'm assuming. But Killer Sans is long into his subordination under Nightmare, so far in fact, that he's sick of it and decides to leave. We then get a flashback of what happened after Killer killed Kara. We find that Killer actually had regrets over his actions, wanting to truly reset and take himself out for what he had done. So one final time, he met his brother, telling him he'd be going away forever and apologizing to him before leaving to reset and delete himself. But the man of the hour comes and forcibly recruits him for whatever reason. Damn. All this started because he got kidnapped. Nightmare would then force Killer to do his dirty work for many years until he came across someone called Color Sans. That's going to be a whole nother video on its own with niche RAUs like Birdtail and Dancertail, but basically Color convinces Killer to live for himself, and so finally Killer revolts. Color Sans joins and helps him escape, and they live happily ever after. Damn, so this would happen yonks after like Underverse, Undertale, and Undertale Trio if it was all connected. That's pretty cool to think that it has an ending. Anyway, pretty cool comic. A little anticlimactic that Killer was just kidnapped by Nightmare, but that seems to be a theme with this AU. So back to my confusion. The comic that gives me the most confusion is where we learn about the two timelines and the Killer Sans being coded to be evil explanation. It says that in the good timeline, he killed Kara, and in the bad timeline, he joined Nightmare. Do you see my confusion? What I've heard is he killed Kara, then joins the bad Sanses. This is why I'm assuming it takes place in one big timeline. Alternatively, the two timeline splits after Killer makes his decision to leave Nightmare. One where he does and one where he doesn't. But that's just headcanon from me. So between that theory and the one timeline theory, I'm gonna go with the one timeline theory and kind of just ignore this one comic altogether. But another reason why I want to ignore this comic is the changing Sans' code explanation. If his code was changed, why does he go on about wanting to try something new after an eternity of resets? That's such a character-driven explanation that just makes sense, but I'm led to believe it's just his changed code trying to justify his actions. No, that's lame. It also contradicts him wanting to kill Kara and go back to the way things were before. That's why I just ignore that one comic. I don't know. Let me know what you all think down below. Now, we have one member of the Undertale Trio left, but unfortunately, I don't have enough time to talk about them or the hundreds of other AUs I wanted to talk about today. So if you're enjoying the video, please leave a like. If this video gets over 10k views in a week, I'll be confident enough to make the next part. Our next alternate timeline is one with not a lot of content about it, but I wanted to cover it because it was the first AU created only 6 days after the release of Undertale, Kindred Spirits. No, not that one. Ironically, this is the only one that shows up if you search Kindred Spirits anymore. I'm talking about the short story about Asriel coming back to the surface. Unlike most Undertale stories you're familiar with, this one is in the form of an archive of our own blog, so reading for me, not for you, don't worry, I got you. In Undertale, after a true pacifist ending, the player is able to explore the underground and say goodbye to everyone they meet. That includes Asriel. The two meet at the flower patch where it all started, and in this AU, they just talk for a while. This is why I don't read, bro. Knowing that Asriel will turn back into Flowey soon, the human hugs Asriel before coming to a decision to use their soul to save Asriel. I don't know how or what exactly the human does to save them, but the human collapses to the ground. Scared, Asriel tries to call for help, but nobody came. Yo, this was only 6 days after the release of Undertale. Don't tell me they had already figured out the genocide route. Anyway, Frisk eventually wakes up and explains that they linked their soul with Asriel's body, allowing him to live on thanks to their determination. And yeah, the two live happily ever after. It's a short story, so they don't expand on much from here, but there is a version that does. Dreamer Reborn. Another true pacifist saving Asriel timeline that was released only a few hours after the first. And this one's a comic! Like the last one, Frisk goes back to visit Asriel before they turn into a flower and uses their soul to save Asriel. While in the last one, they all live happily ever after. This time, Frisk had to sacrifice themselves, giving their soul completely to Asriel, causing him to black out. Upon waking up, he finds that Frisk is dead, and in their place is an old friend, Kara Dreamer. The reunion is cut short, however, as from repeated genocide roots, Kara had been twisted from the person that Asriel knew, and is now out for their soul. Damn, even in 2015, we can't escape from this trope. At least now we know where it started. Anyway, Kara is unable to take out Asriel, and eventually fades off from lack of soul, leaving Asriel alone with his thoughts. Or he would have been, as it turns out, Frisk is hiding somewhere in his subconscious, probably a byproduct of it being their soul that Asriel is using. After burying Kara, Asriel tells the human that they don't care about their genocides, but just want to save Kara, as he believes their soul still lingers on, even though the whole reason he won was because Kara didn't have a soul. But you know what? Kara held on for years to possess Frisk, so for them, I'm sure anything is possible. Anyway, the two make their way to meet with the others, but are stopped in the room before the Judgment Hall. Sans, believing that Asriel stole Frisk's soul, attacks, leaving Asriel to have PTSD of the skeleton from his days as Flowey. Speaking of Flowey, Bro is also somewhere in Asriel's subconscious. But unlike Frisk, I'm sure he's more of a representation of his guilt and past, rather than being a real being. Another thing that Glitchtail stole. I'm sorry. I don't actually hate Glitchtail, I swear. But regardless, it's causing just as much pain as Sans is right now, as it drags Asriel into his mind to torment him more, leaving Frisk to fight Sans. Probably a mistake. Asriel said he himself couldn't beat Sans, but you know how many times Frisk would have had to beat Sans to give Kara all those hearts? Frisk stalls for time by cooking noodles. Honestly, it does sound like something that would happen in the actual Undertale. With Sans now distracted, Frisk goes into their subconscious to help Asriel overcome his inner demons, literally. And now, with full confidence and Frisk on his side, Asriel takes the fight to Sans and finishes him off by telling him his secret code. Fart Master. This game is so unserious. Anyway, that's all I could find for this AU. It's been like 10 years since it was created. Maybe less as we go down each chapter, but they have seemed to release other comics of slice of life stuff with Asriel on the surface, but no resolution of the Dreamer's reaction to seeing Asriel again, or the whole I want to save Kara thing. But compared to Kindred Spirits, it's night or day, especially seeing as Kindred Spirits' title has been forgotten for the Kindred Spirits game, while Dreamer Reborn title has been shared by a game too, which is literally an adaptation of the comic that was put on a hiatus, but still much more content. There's so many AUs I wanted to talk about in this video, so if you want me to continue this alternate timeline, please like the video. I need this to do well so I can continue it, please. One AU I will shout out is Anchorverse, a short 4-minute animation that popped up while I was getting footage, so go check it out, it's in the description. It's very well animated and may just be the beginning of something big. Next video is going to be another trio video, and after that, either the continuation of this or the Underverse video featuring Alpha Tail. Oh god.